Welcome to a very special edition of Radio Free Decipher. We have Evan here as always.
Yeah, how are you?
And we welcome Warren Holland to the show today.
Hi guys, I really wanted to come in and talk to you today.
Great. So, well, there's been quite a bit of activity going on in the last couple days. There's been a big announcement and a lot of people talking.
Right. Well, let me talk to you about it.
Okay.
That's why I'm here. I wanted to kind of fill people in on some of the background for the decisions and talk about options and things like that.
Okay. A number of questions, of course, have come in because in your original announcement you said that people could write those in.
Right.
We are not going to read through all of them. A lot of them have similar themes, so basically we're kind of going to condense those
and talk about
discuss
themes.
about the major issues that recurred in the
that's
messages
good.
that were received. So.
Well, let me tell you what I've been doing for the last day or so.
Sure.
After we made the announcement, which I knew would be hard for people to hear, I have been answering personal emails, done tons and tons and tons of those. You know, some of those emails come in positive, some of them come in negative, and we'll talk about those a little bit later. I also went out on some of the public boards and went out on some of our boards and answered stuff, and I'll continue to do that. What I want to do is make a personal connection to the people that are impacted by this decision and talk through the reasons for it. And, you know, some people will understand the reason, some people won't, but I'm available. And one way to get in touch with me is just by writing to CEO@Decipher.com.
Okay.
I've probably answered maybe 50 or so personal emails in the last day or so.
Okay.
So feel free to send in stuff directly to me.
I'm sure you will get more.
I'm sure I will. But let's talk about the decision a minute. There's been all kinds of things out on the boards. There are conspiracy theories, and there's issues about licensing, and there's all this other kind of stuff coming up, and you know, and none of that has anything to do with the issue about DecipherCon. The total issue about DecipherCon for me was a safety issue with players, and you guys know that I've kind of went through the same decision internally. A week or so ago, or a couple weeks ago, I sent around this thing that stopped Decipherian travel. And that was the same issue. I had people come up to me and say, you know, but we really want to travel. We need to go to this business meeting, and you know, we think it's safe, and all of those kinds of things. And I think there's a difference between an individual making a decision to travel and a company making a decision to do that, or to support that, or to support activities around that right now. And it's not that I think this is kind of a long-term thing. I don't think that this will be a situation we're in forever, you know, but we are there now, and we need to address it responsibly. A lot of these decisions for me don't have anything to do necessarily with an individual wanting to come. It impacts a lot of people, and there's a lot of different stresses that are created by it. I've had emails from a parent that said thank you because I was really concerned about my kid traveling to DecipherCon. I had emails from people that said, you know, I'm really disappointed. I'm enormously disappointed. I wanted to come, but my spouse is real happy because now I'm not traveling.
Right.
And, you know, we have to, everybody isn't in that place that they have somebody else that's going to be impacted, but a lot of people are. And also, it's not just the people coming, you know, to DecipherCon. It's all Decipher employees. It's a bunch of volunteers. It's other kinds of staff and support people. And you guys know that we're in a heavy military area, and the security alerts around here are different. You know, the military's on very active high alerts, and I thought it would be irresponsible. And I knew that everybody would be disappointed. In fact, we're enormously disappointed. Every Decipherian is disappointed. Let me give you an analogy of kind of something that I've used internally, and that was, you know, we're on the East Coast, and we've had some shark attacks along the East Coast. But what happens when those kind of events happen is that people go out of the water. They don't feel safe going into the water, and yet sharks are out there all the time, you know, and these kind of activities happen all the time. And it's not that if you put 1 million people on the beach, you think, you know, they aren't safe, because they swim all the time.
Right.
But for some period of time, there's a psychological impact of that. And I kind of have thought of this decision of, it's almost like DecipherCon is this kind of event that's floating out on a barge outside of the coast and saying, you know, swim on out, come on out and have a good time. And, you know, 1 million people could do that and it would be fine. because they're just not going to have that problem. But there is a psychological aspect of, you want me to swim through the shark-infested waters to get there.
Right.
And I know everybody doesn't feel it, but a lot of people do, which is why 50% of people aren't flying now.
This does pretty clearly address, actually, one of the first topics that we get a lot of feedback here in the emails was, but I think it's safe.
Right. Well, you know, and I think it's safe too, but there's a difference in terms of the responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
If DecipherCon was floating out in the water and he said swim on out, then that's one set of responsibilities, and the other is to try to change the venue of how we do the event and how we support the players and move that to the beach. And if there's a way for us to kind of move that to the beach so that everybody that has those issues, you know, doesn't have to swim out, then that's fine. That's, you know, we can certainly explore those things. But the reality is just that I want to serve all of our players, and there's lots of different groups of players in this decision. There's players that were coming to the tournaments, there's players that were coming to just the convention to see friends, there were people that were coming for the first time and didn't even know what DecipherCon really was all about. And, you know, for the hardcore players and the players that were in tournaments, they are the ones that are impacted the most. And they are the people that we care about at an enormous level, and they're the people that are having trouble understanding the decision.
Right.
Because they would personally choose to do this.
Right.
It's not a risk. I'm an early adopter. I'll go in the water. I'll swim out to DecipherCon barge. Right. Why would you possibly stop this? And it's because I think we have an obligation to try to serve everybody, and we also have an obligation. I have an obligation to think about the safety of our employees too.
Okay. So that you know, basically sums up the first point. There are a lot of emails.
There was another one too that said something to the effect of, well, don't you think it's the players' right to choose whether or not they want to come?
Well, yes and no. I mean, yes in terms of the personal decision, but no in terms of the structure. If you choose to come, there are a lot of other people that have to be there to support those activities. And your choice to come may be fine, but some of those other people may or may not want to come.
Sure. Okay.
Another analogy that was important to me was, you know, people have said something about it's safer to fly than it is to drive and all those kinds of things. And again, we're dealing with irrational issues that we're looking for rational responses on, and it's very difficult to do that. And I had this case really internally as well, where one of the people that drives in to Decipher said to me that they were very happy when Decipher people were not allowed to fly because their spouse was very worried about them traveling. And, you know, we were sitting down talking about the reality of it, and the reality is it was probably more dangerous for him to drive in to work necessarily than it was to get on the plane, but the psychology is different. And the psychology is that that kind of travel created this stress at home that wasn't even apparent to me. I wasn't talking to that particular individual, but I knew that that individual from the conversation was impacted. And, you know, a lot of people are responding to not being able to come to something that they love, and I absolutely understand that. We had every intention of this being the biggest and best event that we had ever done, but I think my responsibilities are broader than that, and that's it. There is nothing else other than that particular issue.
Which I think leads pretty clearly into the next big chunk of questions we got. There were a lot of people that were concerned there were other issues in there, and I know you've said it already, but it bears repeating.
Right, I saw emails. People were talking about the license, and I saw emails about talking about us saving taxes, and I saw emails about, you know, financial issues, and there was absolutely none of that in the decision. I never looked at a spreadsheet. I never talked about costing. I've made million-dollar decisions before that didn't have anything to do with the bottom line of Decipher, and this had nothing to do with the bottom line of Decipher. In fact, just because of the response that you're seeing right now, you know that this is a far bigger issue, and I knew that this was going to be a big issue. And frankly, for me, it's like a better safe than sorry thing. If one player was in some kind of accident because of us putting on this event at this time, and DecipherCon is an annual event. We'll do another one. You know, we're going to go on. It's not going to stop. It's just, if something happened at this time, the responsibilities would be enormous. You know, somebody would come back to me and say, how could you do something that was so irresponsible? And I'd feel that. How could we do something that was so irresponsible?
There are a large number of events being canceled all over.
Yeah, actually, Janet Jackson just canceled one of her European tours. Apple canceled Macworld in Paris. There were about 500 conventions that were canceled. About 200 or 300 of those were in Las Vegas.
A lot of book publishers have canceled signing tours for their authors.
Absolutely. A number of stars had canceled events around movie openings and things that they were going to.
Yeah, I was going through the process right before September 11th of trying to get Lord of the Rings celebrities to come with us to Essen and come with us to DecipherCon. I mean, and there were a lot of people that were excited about that, and then September 11th came and nobody wanted to go anyway. It was done.
But I mean, use Janet Jackson as the example. It's like I'm not sure that any terrorist is necessarily going to target a Janet Jackson concert. That's the rational side of the argument that says, what are the chances of any of this ever happening? And the other side is, even from her perspective, in the press release that I read that she had done, it's like, but her concern for the employees and the people that were traveling had to take precedence over that. So
leads pretty clearly into the next group of questions we had. Why cancel the event and not just decide to postpone it?
Well, that's actually a very good question, because I don't know that there isn't something at some point that we can do, but I don't have anything that I can promise. I don't have alternate sources of this, because the decision for me deals with the time of things. What happens tomorrow if we have military action? I don't know. What happens if a month or two down the road? I will say that the more time that goes on, the easier it is to start thinking about those alternatives and seeing what kind of options we have. But the first decision had to be for me to say, I can't do this. I can't do this, and I don't know when I can do this. And frankly, DecipherCon is an annual thing. We'll do one next year.
Sure.
Those things will come back. But I don't know if you guys are even old enough for this, or if you remember this. But were you around when the U.S. didn't go to the Olympics?
Yeah, in Russia. I remember
Russia. Yeah, in Russia. Well, I've been thinking about that a lot. I mean, I've been thinking about that long before kind of made this announcement, certainly when I was dealing with the Decipher stuff. And it's that, for those of you that don't know, when the Olympics were held in Russia, the U.S. backed out and didn't go. And unfortunately, all those people that had trained, all those Olympic athletes that had trained all their life for it, had this event just pulled out from under them. The rug was just pulled out from under them. And and they spent a lifetime training for that. And the initial uproars and disappointments were big. And then eventually people bought into the reasons that had to happen. And none of our players have spent a lifetime kind of doing this, but it feels like that.
Sure.
It
takes a lot of time and preparation.
Absolutely, and the passion and the dedication and the tournaments and
there are people who spend more time with our games than I do, which is
pretty
impressive.
Absolutely. So the emotional feelings are exactly the same. Exactly. And again, this was something that I thought about before I ever made the decision. It's like, I know that this is going to have that impact, but I don't feel like there are options, and we can certainly try to explore options as we go forward, but I absolutely felt like the safety of the players was more important than anything else I could do. Again, if something happened to even one player, it would be a disaster, and I don't expect it to happen. If we held DecipherCon tomorrow, I wouldn't expect it to happen, but nobody expects any of the events that have happened, like September 11th. It's just the uncertainty of it all. It's too big to take that kind of risk, I think.
Right. In addition to the fact that those issues don't really diminish soon, there's also logistical issues even if we wanted to reschedule DecipherCon.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's issues about, some people said, why don't we move it? Well, moving it doesn't prevent the travel from people all over the world. It's not like we were running an electrical convention down at Virginia Beach that had all the local people from Virginia driving down. We were talking about having people fly from, countries all over the world.
Right, quite literally.
A ton of people, literally, all over the world. And that just exponentially increased the problem for me. There was no driving solution to that. So it's not like I couldn't see maybe a safer place, than Norfolk, Virginia to do this, or the Tideware area. But I'm not sure that solves the issue.
Right.
In the short term, I'm not sure that solves the issue.
This goes into the next major point. There's been a lot of talk of fan-run championships. I know Deck Tech has been organizing something. There's been a lot of talk about another thing happening in Virginia Beach the same weekend for all the people that still have their plane tickets.
Right.
There's also been talk of something in Vegas. A lot of the questions say, what do you think about these? Would you support something like these? And what advice would you offer these people?
There's two decisions. There's a personal feeling of it, and that's, wow, wouldn't that be great? I would absolutely, positively love for something to happen where everybody had the opportunity to participate in the event like they wanted to participate in the first place. The other side of that for me is, but how could I support that? I mean, if I could support that, I could support DecipherCon.
Right, exactly.
So I can't say that this is something that I would encourage anybody to do, and I don't. I wouldn't encourage somebody to do that. But as we explore over the next couple of weeks about how everybody feels about this decision, and some people will agree with it, some people won't. Some people will change their opinion. They'll be positive and they'll turn negative, or they'll be negative and they'll turn positive.
Sure.
And I think we just have to work through this as a group. The goal always is and always has been to serve the players. And if I didn't care, I wouldn't do this. If I didn't care, everybody could have come to DecipherCon and it wouldn't be any issue for me. I wouldn't even have to think about this.
Right.
My email stuff is going to stay open. We can leave the email stuff open for the stuff that we posted in the article the other day. We can continue to explore options. But for me, those options would have to deal with the fundamental problems of travel. Mm-hmm. And I don't know what that solution is right now. We may find that there's some news event that happens in a short period of time and that there's some alternate thing that we could do, but I don't know what that is.
There also was quite a bit of emails that were in support of the decision, and there were people asking about the charities that we're going to be giving to, and if there's going to be some sort of a formal, process with that.
Well, actually, yes, there is, and some of this is in the process of starting, and some of it hasn't started yet. But in terms of the prize money, the initial plan was to have all of the 300 or so champions have an opportunity to choose where that money goes. Mm-hmm. And we will set up a system for doing that so that they can, maybe we'll select a group of charities and they can choose, from that group of charities, or maybe we'll just ask them, kind of which charities they want on the list.
And you're referring to champions being the winners of Opens, state events, people who had already qualified for some seat in any one of the games.
Correct.
That we're going to do.
Correct. All of the games. All the games. The other part of the charity stuff is just events that we have not even had a chance to schedule yet. I mean, the decision is very short term. It creates a lot of dynamics internally for us, but what I hope to do is, like I said, move that party from the outside of the water and bring it to the beach. Well, when I bring it to the beach, we can serve everybody, hopefully, the people that want to swim and the people that don't. Mm-hmm. And somehow what I want to do is take that to the local environments. And I noticed one of the email threads that kind of kept coming to me was, well, that's just for Lord of the Rings. And it was I never even conceptualized whether it was just for Lord of the Rings or it was for everything, and we still have to work through those details. There's a possibility we can do a structured system of having events all over the world that raise money. Maybe they're all at the same time. Maybe they're all over a 1 week period or whatever. But all of those funds would also go into this pool and be donated in the names of all of our players.
Someone also specifically asked if somebody wanted to send donations to add to what we are giving to the relief efforts, where would that be sent to?
We have not set up an address for that, but we will. I mean, once we start the system of doing these individual events, we'll have a place that we'll put up on the web probably that will tell people how they can do that.
Okay. But first, there's going to be this period of all the effort that was going toward preparing DecipherCon, trying to shift to get this.
Yeah, I mean, this was a shock to people in the outside world. It was a shock to people inside Decipher. It's like the amount of time to prepare for this has. When you think of DecipherCon as something that we plan for a year, we deal with different aspects of it over the whole year, and all of a sudden that's not there, and not only is that not there, and the logistics of dealing with that issue, kind of thrust on everybody's shoulders, but there were the issues of now setting up a different system to deal with that is thrust on everybody's shoulders. So it'll take us a week or two, and we'll certainly make announcements about it.
Not to mention making Essen still happen for our people who are in Europe that we're going to be able to commute there.
Absolutely.
Anyway.
Another part of the announcement was that we're not sending any Decipher people to Essen. We have volunteers there, and we have people, Decipher staff there that are enormously capable of running that show, but that creates a different dynamic as well.
Right. So even a little bit more work has to go into that show as well.
Right.
Well, there was one other question that I thought was relevant to the discussion, which was, why was the decision made now and not sooner? I mean, September 11th was a little while ago.
Yeah, well, actually it's been brewing for a long time. You will notice that we have not sold tickets on the web.
Mm-hmm.
And, Bill and the web team actually had that stuff ready to go a week or so ago, and I said, hold off, I'm brewing some stuff, and so it's actually been happening since a very short period of time after the 11th. The first phase of that for me was dealing with all the internal issues, and frankly, I was hoping that something would kind of happen in the world that changed my mind, that really kind of made me think, this is an overreaction, and this is a safe thing to do, and I really need to do this because I know a lot of people want it. Because I did. I absolutely know a lot of people want it. Mm-hmm. A lot of people, every one of our customers that were coming wanted it. I wanted it. All of you guys wanted it. All of you guys wanted it. Everybody at Decipher wanted it.
That's right.
So I kept hoping in a way that some of those things were going to change. And one of the things that actually did kind of confirm this for me was just some of the recent stuff about even our own government saying, be prepared that other things are likely to happen. And so it didn't quite... I had this kind of hope that things would turn in a way that just didn't quite happen for me. And again, you've got to put this on these kind of rational and irrational scales. From a rational side, I could tell you the possibilities of somebody actually getting hurt, flying over here or flying back or going to the convention or being in Norfolk, Virginia Beach area or any of that stuff is really very low. I don't think anything would happen to somebody. And yet, it's all those uncertainties. So,
well, do you have anything else you'd like to tell everyone out there?
Well, you have my email address. Feel free to do that. We are certainly going to try to explore options. I don't want to make everybody feel like this was just a cancellation, because there are things that we need to do to shift the focus. And
I know. In talking with you earlier today, we were talking about options of, do we want to reschedule it for a later time? And it was just like that we can't do that yet. It's too early.
Yeah.
If we said we could do something in March now, we don't know where we're going to be. I mean, that's a little.
Yeah. I mean, well, I would love to tell you, here's a date, and here's when we're going to do something. But I think the reality is we need a certain period of a week or two to even try to formulate internally how we're going to make all of this stuff happen. And we need a time for people to respond and send in emails and try to tell us other options. And somebody might come up with something that's very creative. I was saying, in one sense of the word, this was really sad for me that this kind of occurred now, because if it was like 2 or 3 years down the road, we would probably have some internet ways to run tournaments. We could just immediately restructure and do a world championship over the internet. Now, that would have a completely different dynamic to it. It wouldn't be the social aspects necessarily. But of course we don't have time to do any of that. But somebody out there's a lot of people that care a lot about this event, a lot about the tournaments, and so do we. And somebody may come up with an idea that actually could work, but it absolutely has to deal with the parameters of these issues. So.
In fact, somebody wrote to ask, how can you guarantee us that big events like this won't be canceled again? And that's maybe part of why details about what next aren't there yet.
I mean, this is a national and a world issue, and I don't mean to get off onto that because I really want to concentrate on the Decipher aspects of all of this. But I don't think this will last forever. There may be certain changes in our lifestyle that last forever. There's certain even freedoms that we're looking at that may change in the short term, but I don't think anybody actually wants that to happen.
Mm-hmm.
You know, nobody that buys an insurance policy on their home for a storm damage wants the storm to come through and hit. You know, you do things for a certain perspective of safety, and I don't think this will last forever. It's not going to. I mean, we're not going to stop doing what we're doing. You know, if a certain number of players decided they didn't want to buy Decipher products because of this decision, I would absolutely understand that. I would never want that to happen. But you know, that's a cost that I have to absorb in the process of being responsible for the decision, and I'm willing to do that. But hopefully, what we'll be able to do is either make people comfortable that there is no conspiracy and there are no back-end motivations for anything, and you know, that's one task, and kind of get over those things, and then hopefully we can take the aspect of turning some of this into a really positive thing for the charity stuff that is a component of this, and then maybe we can try to find some solutions that deal with, you know, some of the player issues too. There would nothing would please me more, but I don't know what that is.
So there you have it. If your question was not answered, once again, you can direct that to CEO@Decipher.com.
Absolutely.
And thanks so much for spending some time and dealing with these very difficult issues and talking to the players.
Yeah, I think in closing what I'd like to say is that whether anybody agrees or disagrees with the decision is totally their choice, and I support that, and I understand those differences of opinion. But there's absolutely nothing happening here that isn't trying to take the players into perspective and deal with what we think are our corporate responsibilities as well as our personal responsibilities. But you know, the players and the customers that aren't players are, you know, number one. That's the thing that makes this decision so difficult.
And there you have it. Thank you all for listening to this installment of Radio Free Decipher.